And we are live.
And we're good to go. So call this meeting to order. Attendance has been noted by the clerk.
The roll's been taken.
Thank you. I'd like to remind members of the committee, staff, and our viewing public of the electronic participation policy for virtual meetings. Staff and delegates are reminded to keep their video and microphones off until requested by the moderator or members of the committee. All rules for delegations under the city's procedural bylaw continue to apply. Further, in the event that a connection or service interruption occurs that affects quorum, we may recess the meeting for up to 50 minutes to regain quorum. If quorum is not achieved, the meeting will be adjourned. The full corporate policy 50 regarding electronic virtual participation in meetings is available online for the review. Members of the committee, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest for items appearing on the agenda? Seeing none. Please note that item 5.1.2, John Noble Home request for additional funding for Belcourt redevelopment 2022-512 is already separated as there is a registered delegate for this item. Members of the committee, are there any other items for consideration or consent that you wish to separate for discussion purposes? Councillor Martin. None. Oh, you're pointing to the mayor. All right. Well, the mayor, what would you like separated?
Finally, you recognized me and saw me.
Greg's at a much better angle.
Yeah, 5.1.
5.1?
Yeah.
Any others?
No.
Seeing that, may I please have a mover and seconder for all items of consideration and consent not separated for purposes of discussion? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Carpenter. With no further separations, I will now call the vote on all items consideration for consent that were not separated.
So all items subject to the vote are as follows. Item 5.1.3, assessment-based management services. 5.1.4, update on capital projects. 5.2.1, quarterly reserve and reserve fund update, and 5.2.2, the minutes.
Okay, now call the vote.
All items not separated have carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those voting in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Martin, Councillor Carpenter, and Councillor Van Tilburg.
There is one delegation today, Michael Bastian and Shelley Prue of the John Noble Home. Councillor Carpenter, I believe you have an introduction.
Yes, I'd like to introduce to you our newest resident of the member of the management team for John Noble Home, Michael Bastian, as our executive director. He started with John Noble Home 2 months ago and is a very welcome addition to our team. Michael brings a wealth of experience in long-term care management, including dietary facilities and management as an executive director, general manager, and administrator of over 20-year period. He is leading the John Noble Home teams through the new provincial fixing long-term care legislation, and Michael has recently joined the board of directors of the Grand River Council on Aging. Please join me in welcoming Michael Bastian as our new administrator to the John Noble Home. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carpenter. Now I'll ask Michael Bastian and Shelley Prue of the John Noble Home to come forward, introduce yourselves, and begin your presentation. You have 10 minutes to present, inclusive of questions.
Thanks for that kind introduction, Councillor Carpenter. Mayor Davis, city councillors, thanks very much for having us here today. I'd like to go through our presentation around the Belcourt development. So as you probably all know, the John Noble Home has sat empty. The Belcourt in the John Noble Home has sat empty for many years. The home was awarded 10 new long-term care beds to be developed in the vacant Belcourt. In 2019, to meet a growing need, within the community, the home was awarded 10 additional new long-term care beds, bringing a total of 20 new long-term care beds to be redeveloped in the Belcourt area. The John Noble Home and wish for a 20-bed unit that will meet the needs of a dementia behavioral population in the city of Brantford. wait, this one here. Yeah. In 2019, the home's architect presented a preliminary conceptual drawings to the Committee of Management, and the construction budget was also presented, indicating estimated construction costs and funding sources at the time of the construction of the 20-bed unit. A decision was made to revisit the original design and costings, taking into consideration lessons learned during the COVID-19 pandemic. In October of 2021, the Committee of Management requested the home to explore the opportunity to add 20 more new long-term care beds on the second floor of the redeveloped unit. In October of 2021, the home's architect identified significant changes in the design in order to accommodate future second floor options that would generate significant additional costs, which would not be covered under the current funding model. In March of this year, through applications, the home has been approved for an additional 20 new long-term care beds, bringing a total of 40 brand new long-term care beds to be developed in the Belcourt area. Applications for extra funding to designate the second floor as a complex care unit and the first floor as a special behavior unit were both denied, or they were both not approved by the ministry. And those were extra funding that was a separate application on top of the new long-term care beds. So the complex care unit that was presented to go on the second floor was not approved. And the costs associated with the complex care unit would be significantly high based on the infrastructure and the design of the building to accommodate that kind of a unit. The special behavior unit or special behavior funding that we also applied for was denied by the ministry. But that's not to say that we could reapply for that extra funding down the road. So at this point, we've been talking with the architect, and there was a need to present to have these new long-term care beds operate as regular long-term care beds. So in May of 2022, the home's senior leadership team met with the architect, and there were discussions about keeping the 40 beds, operating them as regular long-term care beds, and then implement strategies and interventions to have the first floor 20 beds operate as an enhanced locked dementia unit. The home would cover the cost for these extra interventions, which would include equipment like enhanced keypads, enhanced security. Also, it would include one-guard systems and other systems to really keep the residents safe and prevent them from being able to elope from the complex. Financial impacts, again, the application for extra funding was not approved, and that really did result in significant changes to the construction costs and capital funds necessary to make this project work. Key features of this design is demolition of the existing Belcourt and then adding the new construction. There'd be 2-floor structure with 20 beds on each floor, making 40 new long-term care beds. There will be a courtyard in the middle, as you can see in the diagram. We will have wandering loops around the home area, so there's opportunity for residents to walk and walk in circles throughout the building on each floor. And then there's also a secure interior courtyard right in the middle, which is going to be very important for the residents to be able to enjoy some outdoors and activities with their loved ones. The 20-bed unit on the first floor will have enhanced security, as I mentioned earlier. And this will enable the home to ensure a safe and secure home for all our residents. Quite recently, a feasibility study was done to investigate the advantages of renovation versus new build and cost efficiencies. Lessons learned from the pandemic, including increased dining space, ability to cohort sections of the unit, enhanced infection control, were all incorporated into this design. G Architects, the architects that we're working with, met with the senior leadership team in May of this year. The leadership team discussed enhanced security and other interventions that would be applied in the construction as long as we get the funding approved. The leadership team at the John Noble Home discussed the option of building the remaining 20 beds as regular long-term care beds. So sorry that was just a repeat. And I wish to turn this over to Shelley. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Shelley Prue, Financial Services Manager of the John Noble Home. And I'm going to speak to you about building the beds and the financial impacts. So a Class D estimate was prepared on the new design by the home's cost consultant. The total project costs now factor in the second story and the additional beds. The project costs are now estimated at approximately $20.3 million. This includes all construction and soft costs, including consultant fees, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and non-recoverable HST. The cost estimate also includes a contingency for escalation, as well as any post-contract changes. The Class D estimate is a high-level and conservative cost estimate of total project costs. After preparation of construction documents and pre-tender, the home will obtain a more accurate cost estimate to validate these construction costs. And through that time, we can undertake value engineering and a review will take place. The province will provide some one-time monies to offset the project costs. They include a total of a $250,000 one-time towards proposal development and $1.8 million cash reimbursement. The home also has just over $2.3 million, and that's city and county available through the previous 10-year capital planning process, and some funds set aside from a previous insurance claim amounting to approximately $127,000. The total capital previously approved for this project is $7.8 million, city and county. City share of that was $4.8 million. This leaves a net amount to be funded in the amount of just over $9.1 million required by the municipalities, with the city share being $6.5 million. The province will contribute a per diem over the next 25 years, which can be used towards debenture payments. The provincial per diem amounts to $321,638 annually.
So next steps, we'll submit the design drawings to the Ministry of Long-Term Care and execute the bed development agreement. We will proceed to construction activities and with hopes that the shovels hit the ground in March of April of next year. There's an anticipated projected opening of the new building by 2024, where we should have our first admission of the newest resident in the new building by December of 2024. And I guess that leaves it for questions.
Thank you. We've got about a minute and a half for questions. Mayor Davis.
Yeah, I've got some questions. This kind of has a convoluted history. Began with 10 beds for dementia care. And with that original proposal, which was to provide this elevated level of care and a very special unit designed with the needs of those residents in mind, are you saying the province hasn't approved even that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So a proposal was written to the province through the local Ontario health teams for the Western region. Recently, earlier in the spring, we were informed that the ministry, they're called priority access beds. We're not accepting any applications at the time for priority access beds, and hence our proposal has not been approved. That is not to say that the home cannot apply again, but at this point in time, the additional operational funding for advanced dementia programming does not exist. However, having said that, the intent is to continue on with a design that will still accommodate dementia and even enhanced dementia programming. At the time, the home feels that we can operate a dementia program, maybe not to the extent of what priority access beds would allow us to, in the hopes that either prior to opening or down the pipe, we can certainly make another application for an even further enhanced dementia program.
And so how many beds will there be, 10 or 20?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is 20 beds now on that first floor. And the proposal that was written at the end of the day was for 20 beds.
And how is the province's contribution to the capital cost? How's that determined? Is it a percentage? Is it just a one-time grant regardless the size and cost? How's that worked out?
Through you, Chair, Mr. Chair. So there's two components. There's some one-time costs that they take in consideration the construction value. So the $250,000 proposal development fee is standard throughout all projects. The $1.8 million is a percentage of construction costs. So as the project, if it were a higher dollar value, it would be a higher contribution. The remainder of the provincial contribution is that per diem, and that is based on the number of beds that you're building. And that per diem will exist over the next 25 years.
All right. And do we know for certain that we'll be receiving the per diem for all 40 beds, or will that require further ministry approval?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, the award of the 40 beds secures the per diem for 25 years at the amount that's been quoted. Through you, Mr. Chair, there's also a lot of advocacy going on in the province right now to take a look at that per diem, because that per diem was set prior to COVID and construction costs. So there's also hopefully the opportunity for the ministry to relook at that dollar amount in light of rising construction costs and rising interest rates, and perhaps increase it.
So if you build it as a municipal long-term care home, you'll get the per diem, basically.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, you will get the provincial per diem regardless of municipal home or not. Any new long-term care beds in the province will get the same construction funding per diem.
Okay. How many beds do we have right now, John Noble?
Through you, Mr. Chair, 156.
Okay, so this is going to increase the number of beds by about 25%.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it's actually a little higher. It's 40 beds that we're now increasing by. So we will become just under what's considered or on the cusp of what's considered a large facility at 196 beds.
All right. And what is the demand? Because I know the private sector is building out a lot of beds as well locally. So
I'll turn that to Michael, because I know through you, Mr. Chair, he does have those stats.
Through you, Mr. Chair. There is a lot of demand for long-term care beds in the Brantford and surrounding areas. I can see the need growing very, very quickly over the next few years as Brantford becomes the best place to retire, as I heard. And I know that John Noble Home has a really good history, a really good reputation in the community, and our wait list continues to grow. And despite the pandemic, we still are sitting on a very healthy wait list. And I can guarantee that this wait list will just continue to grow, and the need for long-term care beds will be will continue to be very, very necessary over the next couple of years.
Okay. And my last question, you've given us a pretty good breakdown of the budget impact for the cost of financing through the debenture and whatnot. So the impact, the capital cost will be. What about the operating cost? What will the increase in the operating budget be, at least so far as the city's concerned in its share? You know, if it were 20 beds as opposed to it being 40 beds.
I can answer that through you, Mr. Chair. So I did provide those figures. I'm not sure if they're in the report that finance has prepared. I think that they are. All I can do is look at what is being contributed per bed by the municipalities today. Right now, the municipalities are contributing $16,246.92 per bed annually. And that's a city in the county. So when I look at extrapolating that over 40 beds, that comes to $649,876.80 annually. Based on the current cost sharing arrangement, that would, I haven't done the math, I'm sorry, but it's a substantial number that I believe is sitting in the financial report from Treasury.
Is that a fixed amount or does it vary depending on what the overall budget is? The amount per bed the municipality contributes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's the fixed amount that's being provided at this time. Through you, Mr. Chair, but the home has had minor surpluses, so it's been reduced by surpluses at the end of the year.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. I let you go on a lot longer, but I believe that those questions were very important. So if any other councillor wishes to ask questions, I'll give an equal amount of time unless you feel they were covered. Councillor Carpenter.
Just to clear, it's in the estimated operating budget expenses. You have a number in here that's much higher than that. But that's the total operating expense. So the city's operating cost would be 400,000 in the report. And I just want to make the committee aware that the John Noble Home does have a meeting with Will Boma's office on July 20th, trying to understand why the extra funding for the complex care beds. And I understand the complex care beds, they would be beds for those would be on PICC lines or dialysis, or that would normally be sitting in hospitals at $1,000 a day.
Is that a question, Mr. Carpenter?
Yeah.
I can answer that. So through the chair, so the decision of the committee was not to incur the extra capital costs that would be required to handle very complex cases, because we would be looking at oxygen and walls, those kinds of things. Having said that, there could still be a case or a proposal that could be submitted to do some complex care within the long-term care floor as it's being built. And it would be our goal to look at those people who are the bed blockers in the hospital and see how we could accommodate them within the new design to alleviate pressure on the hospital system.
And the increased cost, because of the increased cost of building equipment and the interest rates, which just went up again today, so increase the cost yet again. Those increased costs, is there a movement across the province from even the private sector and the public sector to see the province increase the per diem rate in order to fund these increased costs?
Yes, through the chair, that's what I was mentioning, is I'm seeing some movement. We belong to an organization called Advantage Ontario, and I'm starting to see some pressure from all long-term care homes back to the provincial government to relook at the construction funding per diem in light of the rising construction costs due to COVID and the rising interest costs. So we are seeing that throughout the province. All construction awards or awards of beds are facing some similar challenges in getting their projects going.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, may I have a mover and a seconder to put all separated items on the floor? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Mayor Davis. Do we need to vote on them? Well, we don't. They're just on the floor. Oh, okay. So let's go to 5.1.2, John Noble Home. Open for discussion. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. A question through to staff. Is the intention to fund this internally with the debenture?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're uncertain at this time whether there'll be capacity or opportunity for us to purchase this internally. What this bylaw will do is just secure that the funding will be issued by way of debenture. How that actually rolls out at project completion when we're ready to issue is when we'll consider those other options, which unlikely, but could be that we could recommend just another source of funding to pay cash later on, or purchasing internally or externally. But that would come through another decision of council and another bylaw at a later date.
That would come when the project's complete?
Yes, nearing completion, when we know final costs and we're ready to borrow.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none. Let's call the vote.
Item 5.1.2, John Noble Home request for additional funding carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Those voting in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Martin, Councillor Carpenter, and Councillor Van Tilburg.
Next item on our agenda, Mayor Davis, separated an item.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this is the amount that we receive for provincial institutions that are in our city. For example, Laurier and Conestoga, for which we don't receive any property tax directly. And this is called the bed rate or the bed charge. And it's amount that the city receives through the province for the services that we provide to those institutions and that we would normally collect the property taxes for. And that rate is $75 per student or resident. And the last time it was increased was 1987, 25 years ago. And I know this has been a semi-regular hobby horse of municipalities to lobby to obtain an increase. I think maybe now's the time to do another push. Not sure how we go about doing that, but I wasn't here the last time it was done. I don't know if staff, do you have any memory of what we actually did to move the issue forward with the provincial government? I think it was 10 years ago we did that, wasn't it?
If I can, Mr. Mayor, I wasn't here then, but I was involved with another municipality and regarding this, what's a big issue with their local post-secondary institution. So this was a major lobbying effort of AMO. Wasn't done by municipality because of all the 30 post-secondary institutions, universities, and the other 23 colleges. So AMO took it upon themselves to try to increase the heads. It's called heads and beds tax, and they haven't been that successful since 1986. But it's really they've been doing it, and we work with them to advocate on our behalf because it affects the whole province.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think it's a real concern because it frankly is very unfair to municipalities, especially those that have such institutions in their community. But I really don't think it's something we would deal with here at Finance. But clearly, I think it probably is the proper subject matter of some kind of resolution coming to council. Certainly, I think I'll raise it at the AMO conference, which I'll be attending in August. Maybe I'll try and squeeze into the list of those that get to question the premier. But I think I'll do my best to raise it. But I think we're probably going to need, and it likely wouldn't be this council, but the next council, a concerted effort, lobbying effort to obtain some kind of increase that's long overdue. Thank you.
Any further comments on 5.11? Councillor Carpenter.
Yes, I agree with the mayor. It's on the heads and beds tax. or so-called tax, which hasn't been increased since 1987. The last sort of effort was similar to that, AMO, through AMO and members. Maybe I would suggest that the mayor is going to AMO, that we team up with Waterloo, who has a significant university population, to see what they're doing about it. And I'm sure there's always discussion in AMO about it, whether you could add yourself into that meeting if they're having one, or raise it. I don't know whether it's with the Minister of Affairs or the finance minister, most likely the finance minister, but I think it's worth raising. You don't need permission or a resolution of council to do that, but we should certainly think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Any further discussion? Well, I want to pile on that one. Heads and beds, it's often referred to as a tax, but this might be the only tax that probably hasn't gone up in since 1987. I believe gas was around 41 cents a liter. Just so I think I was making about $8 an hour, maybe $6.50. I think a lot's changed since 1987 all around. I don't know how many coffees this heads and beds tax could buy, but it wouldn't be very many. So yeah, I would love to see a resolution come forward and pushed across from all municipalities, because while we love having these institutions in our community, I would say in the current development market that they're in and with the prices of real estate, we're losing money hand over fist by supporting these great institutions. So that's just my comment. And let's call the vote.
Item 5.1.1, 2022 capacities on designated public institutions carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Those voting in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Martin, Councillor Carpenter, and Councillor Van Tilburg.
Very good. There's no resolutions on today's